Hello, everyone. I am going to share my thoughts on Ariana Grande's seventh studio album, Eternal Sunshine, which was released last week. I'm sorry this review is coming up a little late. The Oscars happened, and I had to cover that first. Also, I'm sorry if you hear some distant noise in the background. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about it at the moment. That will not be a commonplace thing. So I haven't covered Ariana Grande on this channel since Sweetener came out, and that was early when I was doing everyone. Like I was reviewing all the big pop stars. I didn't review Thank You Next, and I did not review Positions, and I hadn't gone back and retroactively reviewed her earlier records. It's pretty amazing to see Ariana's journey, her artistic growth, how she's evolved and yet still kept her roots. And I am definitely more in the mood to review mainstream pop albums. That's partly why I'm covering this, and I didn't cover Ari in the past. But also, I'm really impressed by this body of work from her. I think Eternal Sunshine is one of her strongest records. I think that it is at least the one I'm the most excited about since Sweetener. And that's not to say I didn't like a good portion of Thank You Next, but I think Sweetener has better standout songs. Whereas Sweetener also has maybe some worse filler that maybe Thank You Next is a little better balanced with. There's no song on Thank You Next that I think is absolutely terrible, whereas Sweetener might have one or two, but overall I think Sweetener is a better project. And then, as far as her other records, I think, Yours Truly, Dangerous Woman, My Everything, there was songs that I liked, there were bops, but I never fully was like sinking my teeth into every song. I wasn't feeling that pulled in. But Eternal Sunshine might be the first Ariana record where I genuinely am in love with every single song. And, that's really exciting to say. We were definitely thrown a little bit for a loop in terms of how this music, how the album would sound in the style of the lead single, Yes And, which was released in January. That is a very house pop dance track, and this album doesn't have as much of that influence sonically. There's bits of like techno, electronic. There's a bit of up tempo pop music in this record, but Yes And does stand out. Yes And is also more of a confrontational song, whereas most of this record is super internal, kind of very reflective, deeply personal lyricism, and very romantic. Now, Ariana, if you've lived under a rock, you might not know, but most of you probably do if you're clicking on this video. Ariana's private life has been, scrutinized over the last year. She had, her divorce from Dalton Gomez, but then she ended up falling in love with one of her co-stars on the Wicked film, and Ethan Slater. And there were all of these home-wrecking allegations thrown around because Ethan Slater had a kid and a wife, and everyone blamed Ariana for breaking up Ethan and his wife's relationship. We have since learned from certain sources that that is not necessarily how it all went down, and that Ariana being painted in such a negative light is not really fair. I haven't really dived into the whole the whole Ariana Ethan thing too much because, to be honest with you, I'm just not that interested. I don't, it just is, it wasn't a rabbit hole I felt like going down per se. So forgive me if I'm not, aware and up to date with every single thing in that whole saga, but that definitely paints the picture for what this album is talking about because, if you don't know that story, you can still enjoy the record, but it really helps to understand conceptually the narrative that she's going through. I saw on Twitter someone break down wonderfully how this album, and I believe Ari also talked on Zach Sang's show, very eloquently about like how this album flows as a narrative and kind of does go step by step through the last year or so of what she's gone through. The beginning section of the record is, her breaking up with Dalton. And, this is sort of like suddenly all falling apart. Then, and that leads into the idea of a Saturn return, which is something that in astrology people talk about around your 27th through 29th year. Saturn comes back to the place that it was when you were born. I might be wrong there, but I believe that's the cycle. And everyone talks about the Saturn return being a moment of clarity in your late 20s where you like stop, becoming so fed up. You start seeing a little more clearly what it is you want in life, what makes you happy, what makes you tick, what makes you who you are. And so it's, talked a lot about in pop music. And so Ariana just turned 30 this year, and the Saturn return kind of very much plays into that. I'm the same age as Ariana Grande, by the way. She's only 2 months younger than me, so I'm on that same journey. I understand what they're talking about with your late 20s and early 30s. Supernatural is being all caught up in the lust and love of a new relationship. And then in True Story through Yes, and you're dealing with the sort of backlash of what the media exposure of this new relationship is, i.e. her now being with Ethan and all of the allegations that come up because of Ethan's relationship dissolving with his partner, the whole drama because he had a kid and all of that. And then from We Can't Be Friends to I Wish I Hated You, this is more her kind of reconciling the past year that she's had, recognizing that, things didn't go how she necessarily planned. And also maybe she has fonder feelings for her ex that she's acknowledging. Imperfect for You is an acknowledgement of, for Ethan, that, this is who I am. Take It or Leave It. And Ordinary Things is a reminder from her grandmother, that wise Nona, who is 92 years old. That's quite incredible, especially since she's actually featured. She's the oldest living person to be featured on a song on streaming. It's a reminder to, how she was in the Dalton situation. If it wasn't feeling just quite right, you need to know to get out. You need to know when to leave. Sonically, this album is very R&B. I say this as pop and B, that kind of genre. I think there's so much Mariah Carey on this record influence. Early 2000s R&B, late 90s R&B. And that is the kind of R&B you want to be emulating. She works with Max Martin, which, Max Martin is known as a pop producer, but, Max Martin is pared down to match the sort of sparser, kind of minimalistic yet heavy kind of tone that she's going for. It's very warm, it's very close, it's very sensual. And that kind of carries over into the idea of this album being about intimate moments in a relationship and memories. Memories are a huge theme here. I have never seen the 2004 film Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, but that is where the album title comes from. Story about a couple who, and if you watch the We Can't Be Friends music video, it sort of plays out visually. It's about a couple who break up and decide to erase each other's memories. Which, to be honest with you, when you think about it, it's like, that kind of seems like a good idea, doesn't it? Like, just ignorance is bliss, no longer be weighed down by the woulda, coulda, shouldas and the nostalgia that's kind of tinged with regret and remorse. To erase the memory of someone you dated, and if it goes poorly, that's probably actually a good thing. And I would be interested to see the movie because that's a really interesting concept. And she is playing with that, particularly with the We Can't Be Friends visual. But this album is just an exploration of the thought process when you're going through the end of a breakup into a new one, possibly too fast. You're a little bit like, am I doing the right thing? You've got all that uncertainty around, what are people going to think of me jumping from one boy to the next, and what's this going to look like? I'm going to reserve judgment. It's not my life. I'm not here to judge Ariana and her love life. I really don't care. I mean, I hope she's happy. I hope she's in a better place. I think this album shows that. I think this album shows that she's been really going through it and is coming out the other side. She's been really busy filming Wicked, which is pretty remarkable that this album even came out at all. I've seen a lot of people talk about how the writer's strike, but more importantly, the acting strike that affected and shut down so much of Hollywood last summer and the fall, was the big reason why she was able to have time to go into the studio. Because Wicked hadn't finished filming, and so she had all this time on her hands, and she was like, all right, I'll go back into the studio, hit up Max Martin, I'll hit up Ilya. Let's give them their album they've been waiting for quite some time. Because it has been a moment. It has been a minute since Positions came out. Ariana was putting out albums relatively quickly at one point, and then she stopped. And she even hinted that if the strike had never happened, or if she never felt compelled to make this record, her original plan was to wait until the entire Wicked press tour was over, which was pushing us into 2027. Because remember, there are 2 Wicked films. We've got Wicked Part 1 this coming November, and then, if I'm not mistaken, Wicked Part 2 coming the following November. It's going to be a two-part thing. I'm very excited for Wicked, by the way. It's one of my most anticipated films of the year. And I definitely think that Ariana's, role in that film as Galinda has sort of has had a huge impact on her makeup, her, her singing, her presentation. She's a little bit more back into her, white girl era, shall we? Is it fair to say? White girl Ari versus black girl Ari.
I said, sing like that little white black girl that you are. That's what I said. She got soul like a mug, okay?
I know it's a controversial subject, but look, I'm not going to ignore it. Positions was Ariana channeling Victoria Monet. Positions was Ariana working with almost exclusively Black producers and songwriters. And not only that, but, fully, and this also was in Thank You Next. This happened in Thank You Next as well. Kind of adopting a voice that, if you listen to some interviews from that era and then you listen to her speak now, it's night and day, which, there's a whole thing to unpack there in terms of cultural appropriation. The conversation about, a Caucasian woman, in that Black cultural space. It's a nuanced conversation. I'm not going to dive headfirst into that for this video. But I will say I was like, I guess that's who Ariana is. And she's just more growing into that as her expression of herself. But now that she's backpedaled and kind of turned into, blonde hair and just her presentation and demeanor, it's different. It's much more someone who's doing a Broadway movie. I have questions about Ariana's sense of self and identity, but I again don't really want to go too hard in the pan for that for this video because she has a lot of friends in the industry who happen to be women of color who do make R&B music. And I can't fault her for, being influenced by that. I mean, that surrounds you all the time. You're just going to pick up a certain, way of presenting yourself to the world. But the tanner was definitely tanning. The self-tanner, the bronzing. Well, not bronzing, but there was a moment where I was really skeptical about Ariana and what she was doing. But that being said, this album is less hip hop and trap influenced. And I again, this could come off controversial. It's just a matter of preference and taste in terms of musical style. I much more prefer melodic pop and R&B music, a la, Mariah Carey in the 90s and 2000s. Even though I don't love every single song she did, I like that sort of vein of music. Brandy. Whereas, the style that she was flirting with on Positions had a lot of that, but it also had a lot of songs that sonically weren't necessarily as interesting to me or weren't so much the kind of music that I consume. Positions was a very sensual record, and it was very much about having fun in the bedroom with your, Positions is almost like a honeymoon record, really. Whereas Thank You Next was another huge breakup record. Positions was a honeymoon record. Now we're back into the breakup with a little bit of touch of honeymoon here and there sprinkled in. So I think the context of the story is really interesting when you look at, where she's going here and these situationships, as she refers to it in Don't Want to Break Up Again. She refers to her marriage to Dalton as a situationship, which I do find quite interesting. Some people believe that she called it that because she is apparently legally not allowed to talk about her breakdown of her marriage to Dalton publicly. I don't know why that is. That means something is going through courts right now. That's something I saw on Twitter. I don't know the sources on that, so I'm just throwing it out there. Also, we've got a bunch of different album covers, but the one I'm showing and highlighting is my favorite. Not this one. Not this one. This one's okay. I have the alternate that is on streaming now. I do. This is my second favorite version. I like this one. It's, a me, myself, and I kind of Ari leaning on herself with these cool kind of creamy bronze colors. But I think overall the image of her covering her face, smiling, has such a giddy kind of classiness to it. It's like it invokes innocence because of Ariana like jumping into a new relationship and being unsure. I just also love seeing her smile. And there's a little bit more of a magazine cover high fashion kind of conversation with this cover. It's just more direct. It's more kind of it's more eye catching. But a bunch of the other covers, the worst being this one. Good God. No, glad that was axed as the streaming cover it was going to be originally. So, what are the highlight songs for this record? Well, I do want to just get off the bat and say Yes and is a bop. Yes and is one of my favorite lead singles from Ari, million times better than Positions, even though Positions is a strong song on that record. It's one of my favorites on that record. Yes and is like up there with No Tears Left to Cry for me. I am such a fan of Yes and because of how I love the house influence. It's just the best dance song that Ari could make, but it also gives her great space to kind of play with her vocal technique. Now, I will say the Mariah Carey version is even better. I think that a house beat needs a belter alto to soprano range. And I feel like Mariah Carey is so at home, even though I know some people aren't accustomed to that. We don't get the Whitney Houston belters anymore. We don't get the Mariah Carey belters anymore. Everything is soft, Billie Eilish-esque. But Mariah lets loose on that song, and I think some people aren't accustomed to it. It's very explosive, and I like that about it because it's show. This is a showy song. It definitely feels like it's 100% made for the Drag Race stage, and I'm here for it. The weakest part for me is that spoken word bridge part, but I love how Mariah is interwoven into it with her ad libs and vocal harmonies. So I think the Mariah Carey version is even better. It is featured on the slightly deluxe version of the record. We get a Troye Sivan feature on Supernatural, and then we also get acoustic version of Imperfect for You and a a cappella version of True Story. We Can't Be Friends is the other big single, and I see a big radio push for this one. A lot of people are taking the Robin kind of, propulsive yet melancholic dance beat kind of sonic conversation. They're making that comparison. I think, yes, there's so much of a through line there. I'm pretty sure Max Martin is the most on this song out of all of them, which, is quite apparent when you listen to. Supernatural is the other kind of standout song. If you were to pick a single, the next single I would choose would be Supernatural. It's slinky, seductive, and then has some really great vocal layering of Ariana's voice. There's some excellent vocal, dynamic and technique displayed in the way she interweaves herself into the melodies, which she always does such a great job with. She really has an ear for how to make melody and rhythm gel together. And the production works for her. It doesn't overpower her somewhat, softer vocals. I would say other highlight songs for me would be Don't Want to Break Up Again, Bye, and The Boy Is Mine. The Boy Is Mine with that syncopated staccato thing took a minute for me to get used to, but I've been kind of jiving with it ever since. The Boy Is Mine, of course, a reference to the famous Monica and Brandy song from 1998. I do think that this song invites the unfair comparison where you'd be like, well, this song is nowhere near as quite monumental as that, but it's in the conversation and it still stands on its own 2 feet without feeling derivative. Eternal Sunshine, the title track. Yeah, it's so interesting because the term Eternal Sunshine, you'd be thinking it's like, oh, this is my eternal flame. This is my twin soul. You're always going to be in me. But when she's saying you're my eternal sunshine, it means that you're the person I am going to try and forget. Speaking to Dalton as like, you wronged me on so many levels. You manipulated me, and you had me coming back for more. You played me like Atari, like a video game. I think that's pretty brilliant. Also, so gut wrenching because it's so full of regret and remorse and just sadness. But at the same time, you can bob your head to it. You can get into the groove of the beat and the rhythm. This album is just full of earworms. I Wish I Hated You is sort of like the twin sister song in synth, in production, but also in sort of reconciling through looking back right before perhaps the moment that you actually wipe and erase your memory. I rearrange my memories to try to rewrite our life, but no matter how I try, no matter how easy things could be if I did, and no matter how guilty I still feel saying it, I wish I hated you. I wish that weren't true. Wish there was worse to you. I wish you were worse to me. And it's implying that she's not actually that angry. She still has love for him. There's this like forgiveness that's driving her nuts, but it's shows her true nature. I guess you really look back at something and you should feel wronged and you should be like completely ready to sever the cord. You're still sentimental about them. And you're like, why am I being sappy and sentimental about this fool? So I think that that's a really mature way to look at this kind of whole breakdown. Our shadows dance in a parallel lane, just two different endings you learn to repair. And I learned to keep me in one place. Those are my favorite lyrics on the record because they perfectly encompass, really cut to the core in such a beautiful metaphoric way. How their paths will now diverge. What was once one can then become two. Imperfect for You has a key change that is uncanny at first. Da 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 da. It's a really interesting key change, and it's a musical choice that I'm actually really glad Ariana made. It's almost a country ballad. It's a very acoustic song. I found it interesting that they called the acoustic version acoustic when I'm like, isn't the song already kind of acoustic? No, it has a little bit of production in there. Max Martin, believe it or not, providing some beats along with Ilya. And it's a devout love, profession of like, I need to be by your side to Ethan, presumably the Ethan stand-in. And I'm imperfect for you. And that chord is imperfect, just like how life is. And I think that's brilliant. It brings the melody of the song together. And I thought that was a really clever key change. I really liked that. I think it takes some time to get into the skin, but I think that's a strong song for that reason. I think my perhaps least favorite song sonically is True Story. I just vibe with the melodies of others more. But none of these songs are, skips. None of them are. I mean, obviously the interludes are short, but they're a part of the package. I wish they were longer. Interludes are interwoven, and of course we end on Ordinary Things. This definitely goes into a little bit more of a hip hop beat. Nick Lee is a producer on this one, and Luca closer. We could do all these extravagant things, pop champagne in California, hit the slopes in matching snowsuits, hang out at the Louvre, but all I really want is just more time. It doesn't matter what we're doing. Ordinary things, extraordinary things, I just want the time. And there's never going to be an ordinary thing because you make every regular day of my life extraordinary. So I think that's clearly what she's going for here. And then, of course, we have wise words from Nona, who, if you recall, was at the beginning of Bloodline, talking about her very long marriage to her husband and all of the moments that they had fights. And she thought, I could have left, but I ultimately stuck it out because, true love takes work. And if you can't kiss your husband, your partner, whoever, goodnight, and make up at the end after a fight, then something's wrong. And that's wise words. I mean, sometimes it might take more than one night, but I would take that to being like, if you can't reconcile within a couple days, something is seriously wrong. Within 24 hours, you're in the wrong place. Get out. I would say that that's a great way to end the record, but I also would have put Yes and at the very end. I agree with Lux Noir London on Twitter. She called that out. Because Yes and, because it's so kind of stylistically, sonically different from the rest of the record, having it be a closer would have gotten you on the dance floor. It would have had this nice full circle moment. The hard part of the story is over, and now but I also understand sequentially in the narrative why she put it in where she did on the record. So I don't really have a problem with that. It's just, if you're going by the sonic journey, not so much the lyrical journey, Yes and makes more sense at the end. Sort of like how Applause is the end of Art Pop. I get the same kind of energy, at least sonically, but also a little bit in the spirit of the songs from, they're like, look at me, I just put on a show for you kind of songs. They're exhibitionist songs. I think it's a good way of describing Yes and. You even see that in the music video. She's sort of like she's like an art exhibit herself. She's like, all right, you all want to know so much about my life and critique me. I'm an art exhibit, like, for all these, critics sitting in the audience. That was brilliant. Yeah, just stop bleaching the eyebrows, girl. You look like an alien. You look like you look like you're from Gedai Primes from Dune 2. We don't need to completely bleach the eyebrows. I don't quite understand that as a look in Hollywood. It's kind of caught on. And sometimes I wish that the hair wasn't so pulled back with the stark pony. It's just very forced and extreme. I liked in that one interview and in some of the visuals, and I liked on SNL, her hair was a little more, the bangs were there. She was great on SNL, both performances. I was surprised she didn't perform Yes and. But overall, this is a phenomenal record. It's a statement record. It's a concept record. It's very cohesive in all most factors. It has great pop moments. You can dance to it. You can cry to it. Great, beautiful melody and vocal technique on display. Production 10, not 10 out of 10, but it's a strong record. I'm never going to be the hugest Ariana fan, but this makes me one. This makes me like really kind of want to go back to her older music and be like, maybe there weren't as many skips as I originally felt. Like Ariana's voice is just grows better with time. So let me know your thoughts on this record. Do you agree, disagree? What are your favorite, least favorite songs? Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. Please like if you did, subscribe if you're new here, and I will see you all on my next one. Peace, love, and light. Bye.